My Jeep Wrangler TJ has 100,000 miles on it now, so it's time for new universal joints. Plus, when I start out from a stop, it goes tweet, tweet, tweet almost every time I start out. I especially notice it when I have the top and doors off, so it's not real loud, but I'm hoping this project solves that. Taking the rear drive shaft out. There's two universal joints in it, one at each end. Once you get the bolts loose and the caps off, you got to kind of pry it away from the yoke on the back diff, usually. Then you should be able to pull it out of the transfer case, unless, like mine, the dust cover, the rubber boot, is a little tight. So we got to loosen that clamp up. I'm going to wedge a screwdriver in there and open that clamp up. Then it should pull right out. Now I've got it up on the bench where I've sprayed each universal joint cap with penetrating oil, and now I'm taking the clips out. Just use a large pair of needle nose pliers and a screwdriver. Just squeeze the clip together and then get under it with a screwdriver and pry it out. And once we get the clips out, I'm going to use an arbor press to press the universal joint out. This is my arbor press. Got it over at Harbor Freight, 20-ton. These things are like $200. I can't believe they can sell them that cheap. I mean, you think the steel and hardware alone is $200. I think to buy a replacement jack's like $50. I don't know how they do it. I've had this thing for 15 years. But anyway, I set it up with a big socket on the bottom that's big enough to accept the cap that I'm pressing out. Excuse me. And a small socket on top that'll fit inside the yoke and presses it on down. Then you get the cap sticking out to where you can grab it. Hopefully you can pull it out with some channel locks, but that didn't work, so I'm just going to stick it in the vise. Tighten the vise down on the cap itself, and then I can just twist it out of the yoke. Aha. Then repeat, flip it over and repeat, and we'll press the cross of the old universal joint the other way, forcing the other cap out the other side and into the big socket. You got to put the little socket on top so that you're pressing on the cross, not on the yoke. You don't have to use sockets, just whatever you've got. You're going to end up with a lot of different spacers once you get your arbor press going. You can also use those plates, but a lot of times those holes don't exactly line up with the diameter that I need. So I think sockets are easier to use. We're not putting a lot of pressure on this thing, so don't have to worry about too much. This isn't busting apart race flywheels in a S&S motor. Alright, so now we got the new universal joint. I'm going to take two of the caps off. So that I can get the cross part of the new universal joint into the yoke. Then we're going to go press that in. Again, I'm going to set it on top of a small socket so that I can press it up inside the yoke. I'm going to press the cap way up into the yoke. That'll do two things for me. One, it'll allow me to put the clip in on that side, and number two, it'll push the cross way up out of the other side of the yoke, so when I put the other cap on, that cross axle will hold the needle bearings in place while I press it in. See, I got it way up in there past the groove. I'll go put the clip in. Here it is coming back. I've got the clip in that side. There's the clip. And the axle sticking way up on the other side, the axle of the cross sticking way up, so that when I put the next cap in, it'll kind of hold the needle bearings in place while I press it back up. So back to the press, set it on top of the small socket. I'm going to go ahead and put the big socket on top, just so that I make sure I'm pressing on the yoke and not the clip. And I'm going to press it up, keeping an eye on the side. Once it's about centered, I'm probably about there. You may have to take it out and look at it. You just got to get it in far enough that you can get the clip in the other side. Here, I'll show you. There it is. That's far enough to get the clip in. See the groove? Again, put the clip in with a pair of needle nose. Maybe tap it with a hammer just to make sure it springs out into that groove. Then repeat that 2 more times, and we've got that whole drive shaft done. Ready to put it back in the Jeep. When I put the drive shaft back in, we're going to first line it up with the rear differential yoke, then pull it out of that and kind of remember the attitude while I slide it onto the output shaft of the transfer case. Push it all the way in, working it into that dust boot, and put it back in the yoke of the differential. And all the yellow lines should then line up. Make sure that the caps on that back universal joint are within the little tabs on the pinion yoke. And I got to put all the bolts back in, the straps back on, the bolts back in. And then I got to tighten that clamp up on the dust boot. And that's it. It's not that hard a project. You can do this one.
Jeep on.